Welcome to Leaning into Internal Development, expanding the build option for new application requests. A health system CIO production. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. My name is Anthony Guerra. I'm the founder and editor of Health System CIO, and I'll be your moderator today. We're looking forward to your participation. You can send in your questions or comments at any time in the Q&A box, and we'll address them later in the session. Just so you see how we're going to spend our time today, first we're going to go about 35-40 minutes with our main panel discussion featuring Dr. John Halamka, president of the Mayo Clinic platform, and Dr. Melek Somai, VP and Chief Technology and Product Officer with Inception Health, and then we'll get into our audience Q&A. So let's jump right in. Gentlemen, Dr. Halamka, let's start with you. You want to give us an overview of your organization and your role?
Well, sure. And Anthony, so wonderful to see you again. You never age. John Halamka, I'm an emergency physician. I have spent the last 50 years, I know that sounds a little crazy, Anthony, but I am now 64. So 50 years working at the intersection of healthcare delivery, technology, and policy. And my role at Mayo is to, I know, again, Anthony, you know me very well. This is going to sound a bit hyperbolic, but it's not. My role is to curate the world's data, to convene the world's innovators, and to disseminate their innovations to 4 billion people with the hope that all of us will be working on the healthcare that our families and our colleagues and our associates want and need.
That's wonderful. Thank you. It's great to see you again as well. Dr. Somai?
Hi, everyone. Great to see Anthony again, and great to be joining John and you here for today. I'm Melek. I'm trained in internal medicine, but also did my training in biostatistics and informatics, actually at the Division of Clinical Informatics at Bethesda Deaconess. I'm currently the vice president and the chief technology and the chief product officer. And I think I would come back to this idea of like, what does it mean to be a chief product officer in a healthcare system of Inception Health. And just to explain a little bit, I'm part of a Froedtert healthcare system, which is in the state of Wisconsin. We're about 48 hospital systems. We provide care to around 3 million individuals around the year. And we are around $7 billion revenue healthcare system. The organization decided around a decade ago to build an innovation group called Inception Health with a very interesting thesis at that time that we needed innovation and we needed technology to build and become much more resilient as a healthcare system, but we cannot do it from within directly. And we needed a separate organization from traditional IT, I would say, to kind of drive that innovation. And we went through different phases of Inception Health, but the most recent one is we developed an engineering and research arm that is developing the digital infrastructure for the healthcare system, mostly in its digital ecosystem and for patient experience. And since I joined around 5 years ago, we built our digital platform. Today, we provide the identity for our entire healthcare system for patients. We build also the mobile application, but most recently, we also launched a digital first primary care model, which is a total reshape of how primary care is delivered within the state. So looking forward to the conversation. I think there are very interesting kind of similarities between Mayo, but also there are huge differences as you will see about scale and like what is the focus. So yeah, I'm ready to jump in.
All right, very good. So I'm going to lay it out a little bit this way. One of the major dynamics that IT executives deal with is new application requests. So, from the conversations I had and understanding this dynamic as much, as I can, a new application request comes in, it goes through some kind of governance. Let's say we decide we need a new tool. We've got a few choices. We're either going to go in suite to our sort of EHR core vendor and see if they have it. If they have it, we check the functionality. Or we could go to a niche vendor if the core EHR vendor doesn't have that. And then what has been a distant sort of third choice for most organizations has been the build option. But I've spoken to a number of people over the last year, and the tone and the indication is that due to the tools that are coming out, I suppose usually around AI, the build option is becoming much more viable. And it's creating a little different equation as you look at your three options if you do, in fact, want to have a new tool. I think anything that gives health systems more choice, more options, gives you buying power. You're not as stuck in one of those lanes and you have more options. So that's really what we're going to talk about today. First off, let's start with you, Dr. Halamka. Your thoughts on sort of the paradigm I laid out of how things usually work in the options, and feel free to explain to me where I'm getting it wrong. And then just thoughts in general on the build option, and we'll continue to drill down from there.
And I think some folks who are listeners may know that by history, I spent 30 years building EHRs and was the CIO of really the last hospital system to run a self-built EHR. So I have decades of experience building these things. And what you found was, although build made huge sense, it ended up becoming hard to sustain because of the regulatory complexity of all the certifications and meaningful use. But also there was a sense that no one hospital system could build an EHR with all the bells and the whistles and the features. You needed a vendor and a community. But there was also the perverse issue of, if you wanted to hire and recruit talented doctors from around the country and you say, oh, and you have to relearn an EHR from scratch, that was a disincentive. So I tell you that background because the pendulum was like build, 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 because that's aligned with physician nurse needs. Then it kind of swung to the, boy, you probably don't want to build. It's too hard, too expensive. Compliance is hard. Now, fast forward to today, right? And so, as you say, your choice, build, buy, partner. And so let's just talk about buy, right? So your choice is the EHR vendor is probably going to include a variety of code or no code tools that allow you to build functionality, agentic AI, for example, on top of the EHR. I mean, Epic has a agentic AI factory.
Mm-hmm.
And so some people are going to say, well, yes, I'm buying a vendor product, but I can actually build using the no-code tools inside the vendor product to achieve the result that I want. And I'm not endorsing any EHR vendor here, of course, but I hear that, Epic has something like 150 agents that are running today, and you can build your own, you can lift those, et cetera. So that's sort of one option. Yes, you can buy third-party products, and one challenge with them is integration into workflow. And I'll just give you this quick anecdote. I was keynoting this very large conference in Europe, and all the department chairs of radiology of the world said, I hate AI. And I said, well, why? I mean, is it a threat to your profession? Is it a loss of prestige? I said, no, here's the problem. There's a point solution third-party product for pancreatic cancer detection. There's another point solution for renal cell carcinoma. Oh, there's another for a brain bleed. There are 1,000 third-party point solutions in the field of radiology. How do I buy 1,000 products, integrate them into workflow, and maintain them? It's just not possible. So I think if you are going to go out to a third party, just be very careful about how it's integrated into workflow. You got Smart on Fire or Fire CDS hooks or other kinds of standards that may make it more seamless, but that's just sort of a real concern. And final thing I'll say is there is, yes, the build option where you're going to vibe code, or you're going to use, some of these more advanced development tools that's going to get you much faster and much cheaper a kind of application that you might find acceptable. And the only thing I would just tell you, and this is just my bias, and I'm sure we will hear from Dr. Somai about his feelings. I had to build a foundation that included all the historical data of Mayo Clinic in all its forms, longitudinally organized and accessible to whatever we wanted to build on top of it. Because the EHR interoperability, real-time APIs for reading and writing, weren't quite there. So our architecture is, yes, the EHR or other systems of record exist, but then there's a data layer, a platform in between that enables a much easier build of innovation should you want to vibe code or do something yourself. but certainly curious what Dr. Somai has to say.
So I agree. So there are two, I think, points I liked hearing. Building allows you to have much more optionality. And I think this is something that we left out in healthcare system IT in general, where when we look at a problem to solve, the majority of time, like, we are left out. And I totally agree, regulation has been a huge blocker for that, because with regulation, you want to de-risk more than just to think about innovation. And what happened was we left out this idea of building an optionality to be building, and we left only with two. Either you use what you have already bought and you use the vendors you have, and most of the time that's going to probably default to the EHR system. And the other option is probably to look for a third party. But this is the interesting story that we have, which was when we started relying on third party, I can tell you from my own experience, the success rate of third party was very low. And low for two reasons. First is integration is a huge complex problem. And what you do with one integration, you did just one integration. And the second problem, and I see, is that defining the problem very clearly takes a lot of time. So you don't have this ability to iterate. And the more you use a third-party vendor, the more you delegate that problem identification and the way you solve it to a third party. And that is not very successful. So our experience, and I put this number out there, is like 80% of our digital health product that we integrated, for instance, in our work, has not been successful initially. And that is a problem. So building is, for me, a critical component to be able to be successful in our digital transformation and digital strategy, because it provides us at least a capability where we can evaluate better what decision we should be making. And that optionality is becoming much, much more important today because of the way innovation and technology evolves. I think this is an important problem for us, where if you look at the EHR today is trying to lock you in, so to speak, into its own workflow. That is helpful, I would say, for generic workflows where we do the same thing. John's is in your doc at Bethesda or at Mayo or another place. They have kind of a similar workflow. So there is no differentiation for us at that layer. And delegating that to a vendor helps us to distribute the cost of operation and the cost of maintenance across many healthcare systems through a third party. I think where it becomes more problematic is then when Mayo or Froedtert or other healthcare systems try to create a differentiating experience and be competitive in the ecosystem. And that is when it becomes much harder then to rely on just like a generic vendor, and you need to figure out like whom to partner with. And for us, the building capabilities did not mean that we have to build everything. It actually shifted who is the player that we partner with. So rather than going, let's say, to a standard digital health company, by being a builder, we open the ecosystem to other players. Like we have a partnership with Amazon Web Services, for instance. And because we are builders, we could collaborate with them much more aggressively, and we can open up new opportunities to collaborate at scale and build new experiences that are very different. And that's a huge competitive advantage, because it's not only cost, it's speed, cost, but also we don't need custom healthcare specific terminologies or technology. We can hire engineers from around the globe, from other industries, and they will be able to contribute to our development early on.
Very good. Dr. Halamka, you're a big picture guy. If we worry about integrating point solutions, niche solutions, because getting them into the workflow can be very challenging, and you talked about the difficulty of having many point niche solutions that you're trying to integrate into your workflow. And I don't want to put you on the spot here, you can dance around this question, but if integrating is hard with point solutions and we have one extremely dominant vendor that seems to be getting more dominant by the day, that's a slightly troubling view of the future.
Okay, well, hey, that's the end of your statement.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. I mean, like I said, feel free to dance around it, because it's not fair of me throwing that on you.
Oh, no. Well, I will respond. Right. So again, this is one of the things where I love Dr. Somai's view, but I think that the AI tools we are seeing change the game. And that is that why were EHRs created? They were created as transactional systems of record for billing and compliance, and they weren't really created as advanced decision support systems. They weren't created as pop health or value-based purchasing systems. So they're a kind of underlying transactional system. And what I think you're finding is now people want a different way of working. And I think what you see in ambient listening as an example, that they say, I just really want to have meetings with my patient. And the EHR is a thing behind the scenes that is auto-magically populated by this AI thing that I'm running, but I don't want to sit and type into the EHR. So this is the tension. And this is where, Dr. Somai, I'm going to get edgy because, again, not endorsing any product or service or vendor, but if vendors like Epic or Cerner or Meditech or whoever create agentic workflows inside their product, they're going to need to open up their low-level agentic calls so that health systems can build their own tools around the agentic workflows inside the EHR. In a sense, that is going to give us a almost EHR neutral way to innovate if they do that. And let me just give you an example. Suppose like I have an extraordinarily complex scheduling problem because, I need the doctor and the patient and the OR and the instrument and everything to be there simultaneously. Well, trying to write an app yourself that goes into Epic's database or Chronicle and pulls out OR schedules and supply chain data or whatever, it's hard. But imagine this, if Epic made available your capacity to call their lower level engine. Their lower level engine would go out and get the OR schedule and just give it back to you. Then you could start writing an agent that would be kind of amazing in its capacity to automate workflow. So I think what you might see, long answer to your question, is you might see pressures from the customers as these technologies become more ubiquitous for the EHR vendors to wildly open up some of the workflows that are closed today, which will address the problem you raised.
Dr. Somai?
I agree. And I can tell you, and this is interesting, like a counter argument, that we just need to be very cautious about this too. We saw this actually in the digital health space for patient experience. And there was this movement, if you remember, like 5-6 years ago around COVID time, about the digital front door. And every healthcare system wanted to have a digital front door. And at that time, there was this debate between should digital front door be owned by the EHR vendor? And should EHR vendors now be the entry point for us in the digital space to patients? And one of the things we did at Froedtert at that time was we made a strategic decision that we must own the experience with our patients. And regardless whether the EHR system would be providing that foundation and can say, by the way, don't worry about this, we got it, we will build the experience for you. And by the way, they can use our mobile app. Our decision was the way we thought about it is we will integrate the EHR within our stack of digital experience, but it's not the digital experience. And I think that was the key element there. And that meant that, and this is where the dangerous piece is I worry about healthcare systems losing the capabilities to be builders and being able to push, and then they would be relegated to just use what exists. And I feel from our experience, we saw other healthcare systems who have the same strategy, but they did not have the build capabilities, and they were only left with the option to just use what the EHR has. So I think the challenge I see here is healthcare system must be able to say, we want to build and we want to innovate on top of our capabilities. And they need to ask the EHR system, because by the end of the day, we are their customers. And they will respond to customers. I trust EHR vendors wants to actually healthcare system to be successful. It's us that we need to start saying, this is what success means to us, rather than trying to say, okay, we have this success. We are not very clear what we want to do with it. And by the way, we will wait for the HR vendor to figure this out. So I think I agree with John, but I would put the ball on our side, where we are accountable to make sure what does that future look like, and what must we be asking ourselves to do, and then pulling the third-party vendors, the EHR vendors, and even other partners, I would say frontier lab models, and to actually this ecosystem. Because I also feel like you see this massive innovation happening in engineering. And I had the initial thought that healthcare would be the best place for AI to be deployed and actually provide that intelligence layer for us. And it's very interesting to see it, like we're still very, very far behind in terms of the ecosystem. And I worry it's probably the same experience we had back in the cloud computing age, where we thought healthcare would be probably the number one use case for cloud. And it ended up being life science and financial services. So my concern is like, we might be very conservative in our approach to technology, and that might become a blocker for us. So unless we are actively engaged in this, I think EHRs would not have any incentive whatsoever to be open and to say, okay, yes, I'll play along this game of being more open, and there is an opportunity for growth. I don't know, John, if you can reflect on that, on if you think otherwise.
Well, no, and the obvious answer is that we have to have use cases, we have to build things ourselves, we have to prove that the EHR vendors need to change. Without the bottoms-up pressure, they won't.
Yeah.
So let's, Dr. Halamka, let's go off of Dr. Somai's point, which I think is a very interesting one. It's understanding or thinking about the strategy that health systems have in relation to their vendors, and this concept of stickiness and being too tied to your vendors in the sense that it's too sticky. You have no ability to change without it being disruptive to your customers, and in this case, patients. So the idea of putting something over the vendor tool of your digital front door so it reflects you and not them, and that you could change the underlying technology, even your EHR, without disrupting too much the experience your patients are going to have. Because then you have more flexibility, you have more freedom. I think that's an interesting dynamic, probably in every industry, but I think especially in healthcare, we're so tied to our vendors, we lose any ability to move or influence. You know, this idea of influencing change has come up in this conversation a number of times. Specifically, you use the term open up lower level agentic calls. This opening up, this closed ecosystem that all the customers want more open, and it's not going to happen unless they have to do it. And the pressure can come from the build dynamic that we're talking about, or it can come for easier integration with niche solutions based on advances in policy that make integration easier on HL7, all these type of things. So the more freedom and flexibility that the customer has, the more the vendor will be flexible in order to retain those tools. So your thoughts?
Yeah, it'd be interesting. We all know that culture and policy are important aspects of technology innovation. Will there be policy making that requires more openness? I mean, right, you look at what happened under Mitropathy and a whole variety of the expansion of the U.S. common data set and the APIs that are callable and the functionality that started to open things up more, interoperability rule, information blocking rule, that kind of thing. I'm guessing this, that probably the next couple of years, we're probably not going to see a whole variety of regulatory policy making that will lead to the opening up of these products. So what that means is that it's got to be up to the community. Yeah, it's as Dr. Somai said, that each of us, because I travel the world, and in healthcare, there's a lot of financial strain. There's a lot of burnout. There's a lot of issues of hiring and recruiting staff. There are expectations for quality and safety and compliance. And all these factors are just driving healthcare systems to need more innovation faster than the EHR vendor can provide on its own. So in the absence of regulatory mandates, it is going to be the consensus of the customer saying, we can't get through the day unless you make these changes to your products.
Dr. Somai?
And I think that the element here, I think just to build what John said, and I think this is what this isn't, and I mentioned probably to you, Anthony, a few times where in every board meeting we have at our healthcare system, the one slide I add all the time is technology is the business and healthcare. And what I mean by this is if you look at our current trajectory of cost and margins, the cost of healthcare is continuing to increase and our margins are becoming thinner and thinner. And I ask all the time the question, what are we doing today to actually increase our margins so we have much more flexibility to innovate and at the same time working on decreasing cost? And the answer cannot be we're going to hire more doctors, we're going to hire more providers, we're going to grow and build more hospitals. That answer is not sufficient. And the answer I have on myself is we need to leverage technology in an extremely sophisticated way to actually improve our operations and improve our healthcare systems. So on that end, I think the answer here is like the technology must be taken seriously and that the strategy of our healthcare system should be embedding technology as a core principle of the way we think about what we're going to be achieving in the next few years. I think once you have that strategy becoming technology driven, then all the pieces will kind of be very easy to think through, which is what is our investment in technology? What is our play with third-party vendors? What is our build strategy? Because building then becomes much more justifiable by our strategy. It is not like a wishful thinking, we need to have open APIs. I can give you an example. Even though with all the APIs and open spec that are defined, for us to build our digital front door, 80% of the APIs were not in the standard API definitions of HL7. They just could not provide us the right layer for us to build that experience for our patients. So we had to build custom APIs. We had to do that innovation layer because policy is always looking at the back and the future. Like we are always backward thinking. It's like, what's the problem we need to solve today? And we usually look at the past. Like, yeah, we need to look at the patient data. But in the future, like we cannot predict MCPs, for instance, to become such an important piece of the agentic workflows. We cannot have policy running fast. So I think my view is it's a good thing that regulation is taking a step back on the healthcare standardization. It has to be driven mostly by the drive of healthcare system to innovate and drive value to patients. I think that's probably going to be the critical piece. And it's going to require healthcare systems to be much more strategic in their digital strategy and embedding that much more into their overall strategy as healthcare systems, which I think has been something that we relegated a decade ago because we just were focused on meeting the meaningful use requirements and meeting all the different HIPAA requirements. And we needed to check the box rather than thinking like how EHR could be built. I mean, John mentioned OMR back at Bethesda. The idea was clinicians would be on the floor, they will find the problem and they will go in the afternoon, code that change and deploy it again in the evening so they can actually validate the use case. That is not anymore the case. Any change today in EHR takes months of committees reviewing every single piece. And that is not conduit really to drive innovation. It's great for efficiency, but if we want to drive change, it's going to require us to reflect differently about what do we consider technology today and what's the role of technology inside the leadership of healthcare systems.
Very good. Dr. Halamka, do you see a role for build in for most health systems? Do you think that's something they should be thinking about? And there may be sort of you talk about use cases. It may be, okay, there's certain things that we can build and there's certain things that you need vendor grade. And you don't want to be messing with that. So what are your thoughts? I mean, do you see it maybe growing as an option?
Well, and of course, the question is, what's the definition of build? So when we made this very large de-identified data set available to all the 86,000 employees of Mayo Clinic, we included suites of no-code and low-code tools. So yes, you could go build clinical trial emulation. You could go build agents. You could go build generative models yourself, but it didn't require you use PyTorch. And Dr. Somai and I both review a lot of papers for the literature, and I reviewed one last night for a major journal that is going to do a review of health systems across the country and what is necessary to train clinicians to be software developers. And what's fascinating in this paper, 70 healthcare systems, obviously not accepted yet, not published yet, is that teaching them PyTorch was not even in the list. It was teaching them things like governance, usability, compliance, right? Things like that. So I think this is what, to your point, I think the whole point of this webinar is that we're starting to see a series of tools so that you could start to build functions inside EHRs, inside platforms, or as standalone products using Claude Code or whatever that don't necessarily require deep technical expertise to do so. And that's where it's democratized. Will most community healthcare systems have teams of AI programming professionals? No. But will almost everyone in a community healthcare system use AI in some fashion in their work? Guaranteed.
Yeah.
And that's the world we're now starting to live in.
So very good. So Dr. Somai, that's a good distinction Dr. Halamka made. I mean, there's building inside the EHR, and then there's truly building something outside. Those are quite different. And how do you think of them differently?
I mean, I think about building. I think it's important to mention. We always think about building as like we're going to build everything from scratch. Like I give an example, like I use all the time. When I say I'm building, I'm usually like 7 layers of abstraction from being a true builder. Building meaning that I will be part of the deployment of a technology, even if it means writing codes. Like, by the way, some of the code that we write, the majority of the code that we write, like I would say 30% of the code is infrastructure as code. And what it means is that I am using code to deploy an infrastructure in the cloud, and I'm able to automate that. And by automating it, I will add more capabilities around real-time security, real-time compliance, real-time analysis, and I can even do static analysis of the code even before deploying the infrastructure to say, is this infrastructure safe or not? So I think we're going to see that movement where if you look at the cybersecurity risk today with LLM models, we're going to be in a world where healthcare system IT must be able to apply new changes to their infrastructure almost in real time. The idea that it is fine, we spend 1 month updating our infrastructure or changing our system, we're going to be living in a world where we must instantaneously be able to say, is the risk in our infrastructure and what are the changes to our infrastructure that we must deploy across our 10,000 servers, instances that are running, and our 2,000 line of rule based for our networking infrastructure. So I think what we're going to grapple with is, rather than thinking about this from an innovation, it's probably going to become a prerequisite for us to just maintain safety and security. Because in terms of cybersecurity and cyber threats, that's probably going to be one of the most important drivers that's going to push us to think about our architecture very differently. So for me, building is not in sense building new capabilities, is actually embracing new skills and new ways of operating the business in the new world. Like I can, like a lot of EHR systems today are sharing that with the launch of Mythos, for instance, they expect us to start changing our entire development lifecycle and our deployment lifecycle, and healthcare system must be prepared for this. I think we should not be really waiting until the first wave of cyber attacks to increase to say, oh, well, we need to change our ways. I think we need to be proactive in the sense. And that's going to require us to fundamentally change and shift. We must be embracing infrastructure as code. John mentioned we need to create the development lifecycle around it so we can vibe code inside things. We must have those tools and capabilities developed. So I give an example now. Almost 80% of the work we do internally in our engineering is pure AI coding. But what is important was we build the layer around that so that code will never go and do something wrong. So we build all of the skills and all the tooling to allow our engineering team to make sure that whatever they deploy is absolutely safe to our standards, even before being deployed. That is not possible if we're going to start tomorrow saying, yes, we do ClickOps today, like we do our IT work by going to the server and opening the server. This idea of like going to the data center, opening the rack, connecting with a username and password, that is not anymore feasible, in my opinion, for healthcare system to be able to be sustainable. So for me, like building is going to become now a core function, and it's going to be a prerequisite for us to maintain our IT infrastructure.
Dr. Halamka, any thoughts there?
Well, of course, he's mentioned the cybersecurity issues, which are very real. And as he remembers from Beth Israel days, I wrote a lot of the core foundational code that powered the hospital in the mid-90s. And you know that code wasn't retired until last summer? The notion that code I wrote in the mid-90s was still running in the mid-2020s, startling. In the sense that the cybersecurity risks have become so extraordinary that I couldn't have even anticipated the attacks when I originally wrote the code. So as one deploys applications, yes, some of this is usability, functionality, safety, but some of it is just good protection against an increasing array of cybersecurity threats. We're getting to the point where running a reliable and secure IT shop is more than one human can keep in their mind at a time.
Let's go a little more big picture with you, Dr. Halamka. Mythos, Frontier AI, all this stuff around security comes out to sort of a month ago to a very small number of companies they're going to share it with. I believe then we're going to expand it to a larger number of companies. Just an interesting model, an interesting way to do it, not based on who can pay for it per se, but just based on this select list. There's a lot of national security issues that come up. You know, we know they released, was it Fable 5 yesterday or the day before? And within 24 or 48 hours, they had to sort of shut it down and pull it back because the White House told them to. Um, if you're a CISO at a health system, I mean, you're doing your best every day. A lot of this stuff, based on the way it's rolling out, is either going to be handled by your vendors or not. What's really interesting here is we seem to be headed towards a two-tier environment where you are on the list to have these things shared with you, and therefore your products can be vetted according to these tools, by these tools, and you almost can wind up on a preferred list of vendors. I want to buy a security tool, or I want to buy applications that have been vetted by Mythos, and that means you can only work with these 15 companies that have access. Otherwise, any tool you're buying outside that list has not had that vetting. And if the bad guys get a hold of it, then you're in trouble. So I don't know, but I would love your big picture thoughts on the cybersecurity stuff we're seeing.
Well, sure, a couple of thoughts. So are any of these frontier models sentient? No. Remember, they're math, not magic. And what do? They ingest a vast amount of training data. Well, if you're looking at Claude Code or other products, they are simply ingesting the entire sum of what humans have created in software, which is inherently flawed. So is it surprising that they can spot flaws? No. In fact, they're trained on all the mistakes we made. So, I think that it is going to become increasingly important to have tools available. And I'm convinced they will become more generally available. I mean, we're just early days where we don't quite understand the risks, but that our software will have to undergo scrutiny by these AI systems to check for the known human frailties that we have before we can feel like that software is going to be secure. But as you also point out, this is a Cold War. We will create better and better products, and the bad actors will create better and better attacks, and we'll just go back and forth and back and forth. So I wish I could tell you this is a project. It's a process. It's continuous. And having the AI tools to do the vigilance and improvement will just be part of our infrastructure forevermore.
Yeah, Dr. Somai, just think of it at a high level that, I would like to have it shared with me before the bad guys get a hold of it, right? And if you're not sharing it widely, for whatever reason, you're sharing it with a very small group, and somehow the bad guys get a hold of it before it gets to me, that's a little concerning. But I mean, you're so powerless. This stuff is happening so beyond the level of anybody's influence. We're just spectators to a certain degree. You're on mute, Dr. Smythe.
I mean, it's such an important topic, and the way we think about it is, we spend so much time on our cybersecurity, and I can tell you, like, our entire engineering team is SOC 2 compliant. So even though as a healthcare system, we decided that we're going to build the SOC 2 compliance as if we are a third-party vendor within our healthcare system, and that was very important for us. But the key piece that I like to mention is we must build the tools so the speed at which we are able to deploy those fixes is actually matches the speed of an attacker trying to use the breaches that they identify. And I think that's the key differentiation here, where we must equip our cybersecurity and our engineering, where cybersecurity is not anymore a side entity that works on third-party risk assessment or making sure that our HIPAA audit is performed well, or that we have BAA set up with third-party vendors. We today have around 1,600 third-party vendors today. Are those 1,600 third-party vendors having the right development lifecycle that they can guarantee that they would be able to patch those capabilities in real time? I can tell you, probably not. And we're probably going to have to re-update and reassess our BAAs and our third-party risk assessment very differently. And we're going to start asking questions like, what is your time to deploy a patch today? What's your average in the last 60 days of CVEs that were detected that you have been able to solve? And I think health systems need to build those capabilities. I agree with John, like, it's going to be a process, but we're going to have to get started because all other industries are already in this game. I just feel like in healthcare, we are in this bubble where it's security by obscurity in certain sense. Like that's going to have to be resolved. And cybersecurity has to be elevated in the agenda of technology as like one of the core focus. That's going to be key.
All right, very good. Let's go to our Ask a Co-Panelist section, which is my favorite. Dr. Somai, do you have a question for your colleague, Dr. Halamka?
I think the question I have, John mentioned that he worked on OMR at that time at Beth Israel. Would you consider healthcare systems today, with all the AI and all the experience we had, like you mentioned, 30 years of experience building EHR systems, and we learned the lessons where regulation has failed physicians, technology has failed, honestly, the mission, the paper by Air to Human and the RAND paper back in 2004, like all those mentioned the beauty of how technology is going to really change healthcare in terms of cost, quality, and access. And I think that doesn't seem to be the case today. Is there part two of that story where healthcare system takes back those learnings? And do you see healthcare system today capable of saying, let's build this future with the agentic platform? Let's really have those kind of innovation from within, where we actually learn from what we're doing, because the speed, the scale, and the capabilities are fundamentally different today than it was even 2-3 years ago.
So last week, Mayo held its annual innovation conference, which is called Platform Ed. And the closing of Fireside Chat was Bob Wachter and me. And we were, this is a treat.
His new book. Yes, his new book, The Giant Leap.
Yeah. So
I hope you're not getting a commission on those sales. Okay. All right.
Yeah. And so I just stated in this Fireside Chat, we asked the question, if doctors have spent 2 decades using challenging EHR systems, entering data, are they finally getting something back? Are we on the cusp of giving them something good? And the conclusion from the Fireside Chat was yes. And here's why, right? So we recognize that for a whole variety of diseases, just the nature of their diagnosis is late stage. Patients may not do well. Healthcare is expensive and painful. But you're starting to see by looking at patterns of data that could be years before traditional diagnosis, you could start to detect these things and make interventions when things are curable or at stage 0. And we're starting to also see, I mean, as a 64-year-old person, my eyesight, although it's fine, is not quite as precise as it used to be when I was in my 20s, but AI doesn't age. So AI can go look at the EKG, go look at the digital pathology, go look at the X-ray and say, yeah, do you know that I've looked at it and I know you human can't see it. But based on the H&E stain on this tissue, this chemotherapeutic agent won't work. Don't even try it. And this is 2026, right? This is not fantasy. We are starting to see predictive algorithms that are multimodal, foundation models that are multimodal, that are going to give clinicians the augmentation that gives them something of value back. And these tools are going to be ubiquitously available. So I have good confidence that we are moving from the era of transaction processing and compliance to a new era where humans and AI working together will be able to deliver safer quality care.
Perfect. Dr. Halamka, you have a question for Dr. Somai.
So all of what I just said, assume it's true. But have you seen yourself true return on investment for AI yet? And I recognize, very hard to predict the future. But if you look at the money that is being invested in all of these products and services and infrastructure, are you seeing a ROI? And if so, where?
We haven't seen ROI, and I think it's very early. I agree with you. There is no ROI, and the only ROI I see is massive capitalization of every AI company. I think it's probably the 1990s, like the 1990s before the 2000 bubble, where everyone was building fiber optics and saying, what is the ROI about fiber optics? But I agree with John that I think the ROI is probably going to be a second abstraction following the AI investment. Like the investment now is on hardware, massive investment in capabilities. We're going to hear models that are in the 10 trillion parameters coming soon. The scaling law still seems to be resisting any plateauing. So I do agree that it seems surreal for now. And I think the ROI is going to require much, much hard work. Like the future that John's been mentioning is something I've been dreaming about, like since I joined informatics and was doing a doctor. Like I'm really certain that we are providing care at the most capable potential of humans. We train people for decades. It's probably one of the most complex experience that we have built as humans and organization. Like Peter Drucker mentioned that this healthcare is the most complex human organization ever built. And I think we are reaching a limit of the capabilities to continue. So I see a massive unlock of potential, but it's going to be really about people taking what we have been building and using the AI to an advantage to revamp that. And I share that. I share that vision of John. Like I believe that we're gonna see new innovations coming in healthcare that are gonna become very impactful at very small scale initially, and that's gonna change the way we are thinking about even how we practice. And by the way, it might not happen at the hospital. And this is kind of my other challenge to us is it might actually not occur in the healthcare system because healthcare systems are gonna still unlocked into the old thinking. And what I mean by this is we might be thinking like how we integrate with EHR. The future might not even be in an EHR. Like the future might be in the hand of the consumer on an agentic platform. And I can tell you patients today have the majority of their experience outside the healthcare settings already. So I think once we're going to see that future, and the concern I have is like we should probably be part of that story, and we have an accountability and responsibility. I mean, I think we're speaking about AI in terms of like there is an innovation and importance here. I actually would stress on the opposite, which is as clinicians, we have an accountability to deploy AI, even if it improves healthcare by 15%, even if it improves like our efficiency of detecting diseases much earlier. I think there is a responsibility for us to be in that wave. And it's us, like we're getting gray hair now. John has more gray hair than me
Mine's
too.
gone.
And I think we're gonna have, to need really starting to refresh our minds and building on that experience and say, okay, this is where the future holds, and this is where we're gonna try to push to. We're gonna have to open these doors. And that's kind of where I'm very optimistic about where that is going to happen. I think the challenge is going to be very tough for us in the healthcare industry because of the wave of innovation, and the speed and the scale is going to require us to reinvent ourselves. And I don't think we are prepared as an industry for that. I think I see it in many other industries. Life sciences is reinventing itself. Material sciences is reinventing itself. I think healthcare as operations of medicine is still really not pushing the boundary yet at the scale that I would have hoped for. I mean, I'm a very optimistic person by design. I hope that healthcare will be changing in 2010 with the cloud compute. Now I'm having the same thinking. I also dreamed about it with the blockchain experience of what happened in the blockchain in 2018, and now with AI. So I think this third act might be the most important, hopefully, but it's going to require us to really be in that innovation space.
All right, final question, and then I'll let you gentlemen go. It's been a wonderful conversation. Future-proofing comes to mind. Maintaining, doing some things that put you in a good position to deal with whatever comes tomorrow. When things are happening so fast. I'll give an example. I have a lot of conversations with people around cybersecurity and business continuity and resilience and all that kind of thing. And one of the thoughts I had during one of these conversations was you really need to make sure you have the governance in place to deal with whatever happens, because there's so many scenarios. If you're just focused on scenario planning, there's a good chance that whatever happens is not going to line up perfectly with one of your scenarios. But if you have a good governance in place, you can then address whatever scenario happens. When it comes to some of the issues we've been talking around a building possibly becoming more of a viable option, and any of the other dynamics we've discussed today, anything come to mind around future proofing and things you can do today to deal with no matter what we think is going to happen tomorrow? Dr. Halamka?
So, since Dr. Somai and I both trained in the Boston area, I, of course, did my postdoctoral work at MIT with Hal Abelson and Jerry Sussman. And these two professors at MIT taught all their students, and this was, early 90s, the importance of abstraction layers, which Dr. Somai has already mentioned once in his remarks. The idea that technology will change continuously, but principles probably will not. And so that is, you have no problem upgrading your computer when the processor gets too slow, right? There's an abstraction layer between your operating system and your application and your computer. So upgrading your computer, no big deal. We need to think about our architectures in healthcare in those terms. Do not have a single vendor dependency. Lock into a proprietary system that runs in one environment from one vendor for which upgrading is impossible. I mean, we talked about the EHR, but I mean, more in general, if you start going with closed proprietary lock-in, you're not going to be able to future-proof your organization. So, for example, you may see that Mayo Clinic announced, 7 years ago, a huge collaboration with Google, and a few weeks ago, a huge collaboration with Microsoft. And the idea is we're a multi-cloud organization, and we can use Claude, and we can use OpenAI, and we can use Microsoft, and we can use Google, and it's all fine. Right tool, right purpose. You're not, simply sidelined at the pace of any one product or vendor.
That's great stuff. Dr. Somai, EHR lock-in is one thing. Now we're talking about LLM lock-in, right? You don't want to be locked to one. But I have heard conversations where people talk about who are you going to pick as an organization, which LLM you're going to pick, which is kind of goes against what Dr. Halamka is advising about. Have multiple choices, pick everybody, that kind of a thing. So your thoughts?
I mean, we our deployment, for instance, I give an example of our deployment of our AI and LLM model, which, by the way, was built internally, the entire abstraction layer of the intelligence layer, and that could be another something we could discuss about in another conversation. Was we made the initial decision, and this goes back 18 months ago. By the way, in the AI era, it means like probably 4 decades ago. We made the decision that we needed an API AI routing engine, and basically we would be able to switch based on what is the best performance, what is the right use case, and what is the right token consumption. And I can tell you, like, the interesting piece about healthcare today is that we are not yet at token maximization and token routing and token caching, because we're still like very naive in our AI journey. But the AI journey is going to push us absolutely to be much more efficient in the way we consume AI, how we consume it, and how we run it. Today, we believe that the consumption is low, but we have seen other industries where AI token cost is almost on par with the cost of humans. And that level of consumptions, if we extrapolate that in healthcare, is going to mean healthcare is going to double in terms of cost. So I think we're going to have to reaching that point where absolutely lock-in must not exist, and you should build your strategy to make sure that you have that analysis done well. I think my summary of the conversation for me today is we need to be much more responsible of our IT and technology strategy of healthcare systems, and it must be part of the narrative of the healthcare strategy overall. I think sometimes we speak about the health strategy as one layer, and then it trickles down, and that we must apply it in IT. I think the story has to be reversed, where IT strategy must be the foundation of that conversation of what we want to be as healthcare systems and how to drive it. I think that that's probably going to be the key, seeing technology at the front seat of how healthcare systems think about their strategy for the next 5 years to a decade. I mean, things are going to move fast.
And as you say,
go ahead, please.
Bottom-up innovation, but centralized governance will win the day.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, that's about all we had time for today regarding continuing education. You could use the link I sent out in the chat box to download a certification of attendance. There are also links to some other health system CIO resources. I want to thank our panelists for spending some of their valuable time with us today, and you for attending. And with that, everybody have a wonderful day. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you.
No, thanks, Anthony. And John, it was great seeing you. It was a great conversation.
Thank you.